Cincinnati.
Table of Contents. Cincinnati.
All about Cincinnati. From Porkopolis, the Queen City of the West. And learn how this frontier city got its name. Visiting and touring information. Geography. History. Attractions. And other points of interest.
Dr. Sidney Soclof. Dr. Sidney 22 at gmail.com. 2023. Narration by Dr. Sidney Soclof.
Zoe Phonemes.
And Nathan Koltove. For a complete discussion of YouTube navigation, please go to tiny.1/ytnavigator. Cincinnati.
Cincinnati is called the Queen City of the West.
This shows Cincinnati in southwestern Ohio.
Where is Cincinnati? Cincinnati is in southwestern Ohio, on the Ohio River across from Covington, Kentucky.
Here is Cincinnati on the Ohio River.
This is the region around Cincinnati. Cincinnati is across the Ohio River from Kentucky and a short distance from Indiana.
The Licking River is the Marjo tributary flowing into the Ohio River from Kentucky in the south.
The Great Miami River, also called the Miami River, is a tributary of the Ohio River, approximately 160 miles, 260 kilometers, long, in southwestern Ohio. This river enters the Ohio River just downstream west of Cincinnati. The Little Miami River joins the Ohio River just upstream east of Cincinnati. This is a map of the watersheds of the Great Miami River beige and Little Miami River yellow. The river is named for the Miami, an Algonquin-speaking Native American people who lived in the region during the early days of European settlement. They were forced to relocate to the west to escape pressure from European American settlers. There is no connection between this river and the Miami River in Florida, of the city of Miami.
Cincinnati is just across the Ohio River from Kentucky, and roughly 300 miles from both Detroit and Chicago. Cincinnati is the third largest city in Ohio, with a population of 310,000 and a metropolitan area population of nearly 2 million. Columbus is the largest city in Ohio, with 900,000, and Cleveland is in third place at 374,000.
This is the greater Cincinnati area of southwestern Ohio. Cincinnati is a dynamic commercial metropolis with a definite European flavor and a sense of the South. Cincinnati's tidy center, rich in architecture and culture, lies within a short walk of the arty Mount Adams district, the attractive Riverfront and the lively over-the-Rhine area and the north end of downtown.
The history of Cincinnati.
Columbia, the first settlement, was founded near the mouth of the Little Miami River in 1788. Another settlement was laid out and called Losanteville, which means town opposite the mouth of the Licking. Fort Washington was built near the site in 1789. The following year, General Arthur St. Clair, the newly appointed governor of the Northwest Territory, renamed Losanteville to honor the Revolutionary War Officers Society of the Cincinnati, and made it the county seat of Hamilton County. Growth began after General Anthony Wayne's victory, 1794, at Fallen Timbers lessened the threat of Indian attacks. The beautiful region lying between the lower course of the rivers Little Miami and Big Miami, and bordered on the south by the Ohio River, was famed, long before the days of the Revolutionary War, for its rich productiveness and its lovely scenery.
Enterprising Virginians organized the Ohio Land Company of 1749 and sent their agent, Christopher Gist, a wood-wise scout and surveyor and a comrade of Washington, to explore the valley of the Ohio. The Ohio Land Company of 1749.
In 1750, Gist traversed Ohio and reached the Miami country. The bold pioneer was enchanted with the richness and beauty of the Big Miami Valley, in which he beheld the fairest meadows that ever can be. This Ohio country is fine rich level land, well timbered with large walnut ash sugar trees. It is well watered and full of beautiful natural meadows abounding with turkeys, deer, elk, and most sorts of game, particularly buffaloes. In short, it wants nothing but cultivation to make it a most delightful country. The French government, in 1752, formally declared that the Ohio River and its tributaries belonged to France by the discoveries of La Salle. The French claimed jurisdiction over Louisiana, including the Ohio Valley, for 83 years, from 1682 to 1763. The French and Indian War, from 1753 to 1760, ended in the conquest of New France. With the Treaty of Paris in 1763, France ceded her possessions east of the Mississippi River to England.
Following the French and Indian War, Native Americans residing in the Ohio country feared that American settlers would flock into the region. The French allies had lost possession of their North American colonies due to the war and the Treaty of Paris of 1763. Realizing the precarious situation, Chief Pontiac, a leader of the Ottawa Indians, attempted to form a native confederation to stop the westward flood of British colonists. Pontiac's attempt, known as Pontiac's Rebellion, failed to drive the Europeans from North America, but it did prompt the British government to implement the Proclamation of 1763.
The Proclamation of 1763 forbade English colonists to live west of the Appalachian Mountains. Any settlers currently west of the mountains had to move back east. All English territory between the Appalachians and the Mississippi River became an Indian reserve. England implemented the proclamation for two reasons. First, the English hoped to prevent further conflicts with the Native Americans. The French and Indian War had nearly bankrupted England, and it cost the British government substantial sums of money to keep a military force in the New World to protect the colonists. Most Native Americans east of the Appalachians had already been exterminated by the colonists or forced west of the mountains. The Indians in the Ohio country would hopefully not attack the colonists east of the mountains because of England's pledge. Second, England, because of its serious financial straits, hoped to tax the colonists. Most bureaucrats sent to enforce the taxes remained in the major cities along the Atlantic seaboard. Those colonists west of the Appalachians were well out of reach of the tax collectors. By keeping the colonists east of the mountains, England hoped to collect taxes from them to recover from debt.
While the Proclamation of 1763 improved England's relations with the Ohio country natives, it greatly upset the colonists. The whole reason they had supported the French and Indian War from 1756 to 1763 was to gain access to land in the Ohio country.
By implementing the proclamation, England denied the colonists this opportunity. Many colonists became convinced that England did not care about nor understand the colonists' needs. The Proclamation of 1763 remained in effect until 1776, when the Americans declared independence from England. Despite the proclamation, Colonists moved into the Ohio country before 1776. Many struggling families east of the Appalachians sought better fortunes out west. Also, some missionaries, especially those of the Moravian Church, came to the Ohio country in the years between the French and Indian War and the American Revolution. They were few, but their arrival was only a precursor of what would come once the Americans gained their independence by the Treaty of Paris, 1783.
From the close of the French and Indian War in 1763 to the Treaty of Paris, which closed the Revolutionary War in 1783. A period of 20 years. Great Britain held possession of North America, from the Atlantic to the Mississippi. During the war, the settlement went on steadily to western Pennsylvania, western Virginia, and central Kentucky. In 1790, the state of Kentucky had a population of 74,000. The Ordinance of 1787. The year 1787 gave the American people two famous national documents: the Constitution of the United States and the Ordinance organizing the territory northwest of the Ohio River. What was the territory organized under the Ordinance of 1787 and now distinguished as the Old Northwest? How extensive was it? And what were its boundaries? It was the original public domain of the country. First public or government lands.
The entire area was 266,000 square miles. It included the land now embraced by the states of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and part of Minnesota.
The cities of Louisville and Pittsburgh seemed destined by their geographical locations to become great cities.
Pittsburgh is located at the beginning of the Ohio River, due to the confluence of the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers. Louisville is located where the falls of the Ohio River required a portage.
In the case of the Queen City, Cincinnati, there was no apparent geographical reason for its location. Indeed, it was the second or third choice of the early settlers. Both Columbia, at the mouth of the Little Miami, and North Bend, near the Great Miami, were settled before the first houses were built at Cincinnati. However, these two towns soon proved to be susceptible to springtime flooding. The advantages of Cincinnati's situation proved more evident after the city grew than before the location was decided upon. Across the Ohio was the mouth of the Licking River, which reached into the rich heart of the bluegrass. In the hinterland behind the town lay the farmlands of Ohio and Indiana, whose products would have to be processed and shipped. These considerations brought the first inhabitants to Cincinnati in 1788. Cincinnati was not Ohio's first town. That distinction belongs to Marietta, which a company of New England veterans founded a year earlier at the mouth of the Muskingum River.
Cincinnati owed its origin to the political influence of a New Jersey judge, congressman, and speculator, John Cleves Symmes, who purchased from Congress 1,000,000 acres between the Great Miami and Little Miami rivers in 1788, for only 67 cents per acre.
The first immigrants landed in 1788 on the eastern edge of Symmes's purchase and called their village Columbia. 3 settlements, Losanteville, later Cincinnati, North Bend, and Columbia, were established, and Fort Washington was built in 1789.
By 1790 there were 50 cabins, a mill, a church, and a school. However, the river, swollen with spring rains nearly every year, flooded the settlement. Within a few years, Columbia declined. many of its inhabitants moving down the river a few miles to the more promising situation of Cincinnati. Thus, ironically, the Queen City, one of the most flood-afflicted spots in the valley, was the beneficiary of the drowning of an infant Nebo.
In 1788, Israel Ludlow, Matthias Denman, and Robert Patterson purchased 800 acres from Sims along the Ohio River at the Licking River's mouth. Sims had purchased 2 million acres of land from the Confederation Congress in 1787 and now hoped to become rich by selling parts of the Sims purchase to others. Denman provided the necessary cash. Patterson found settlers and Ludlow surveyed the land to make sales and established a town. By early January 1789, Ludlow had plotted the town. The three men named the town Losanteville.
The first name of the new city was Losanteville, a curious mixture of Greek, Latin and French Los Anteville, meaning village, ville, opposite, ante, the mouth, os, of the Licking, river. This name underlines the importance of that river in the selection of the site. The founders hoped to tap the increasing prosperity of Kentucky. Soon afterward, the name of the city was changed to Cincinnati. The town grew slowly. 1 month after the settlement was established, only 3 log cabins existed in Losanteville. On the outlying lots, settlers had constructed 20 cabins and 1 frame house. 11 families and 24 single men lived on the land. However, in August 1789, the village began to grow quickly. The construction of Fort Washington was authorized to protect settlers in both the Sims Purchase and the Miami Purchase, as well as in northern Kentucky. Fort Washington was completed in December 1789. Usually, 300 soldiers lived in the fort, increasing Losanteville's population to nearly 500 people. From the river, early Cincinnati looked like a green and open theater carved out of the hills.
Cincinnati rested on a plain of about 4 square miles, which was ringed about by heavily forested highlands. The town site embraced 2 levels. The lower one, or the bottom, was a narrow belt of land, 200 feet wide and only 7 feet above the normal high water mark of the river. This lowland was imperiled by floods almost every spring. The second level, called the hill, rose sharply 50 feet above the first bank.
Cincinnati's first years were precarious. The Indians had not yet been pacified. And indeed, they had turned back several army attempts to subdue them. They raided the Miami district so often that Kentuckians grimly referred to it as the slaughterhouse.
In 1792, Fort Washington was built at Cincinnati as the pivotal outpost in the war against the Indians. During these years, the Queen City was a garrison town, and friction between military and civilian interests dominated its life. This hostility spilled into violence before the commander and the settlers reached an amicable arrangement.
The power of the Indians was broken by General Mad Anthony Wayne at the Battle of Fallen Timbers in 1794. Gradually, the army was reduced, the fort dismantled, and the land sold.
Cincinnati had emerged as a major city, primarily due to its strategic location on the Ohio River. Hundreds of settlers flocked to the community, and by 1803, the year that the United States Army abandoned Fort Washington, the city had roughly 1,000 civilians. It continued to grow, reaching nearly 10,000 residents by 1820.
Despite the problems raised by the Indians and the armed forces, Cincinnati grew rapidly.
In 1790, the governor of the Northwest Territory, Arthur St. Clair, proceeded to establish Hamilton County and made Losanteville the county seat. St. Clair disliked the name Losanteville and changed the town's name to Cincinnati. An additional 250 families arrived later that year, swelling the town's population to nearly 700 people. Law and order remained absent from Cincinnati during its early years. The settlers organized a court and hired a sheriff, but the soldiers routinely had to establish martial law in the community. This became especially common as tensions increased with local Native Americans, especially the Shawnee Indians. Contributing to the lawlessness, many residents grew corn, which they distilled into alcohol and sold to the soldiers. During 1790 and 1791, thousands of militiamen from Kentucky and Pennsylvania flooded Cincinnati for expeditions against the Native Americans. St. Clair faced such a difficult time maintaining control of his men in the town, with 3 taverns, that he moved his men to nearby Ludlow's Station. After St. Clair's defeat, occurring at the hands of the Indians in 1791, many settlers fled Cincinnati, fearing the natives would descend upon them. Despite the lack of order and the various safety concerns, hundreds of settlers flooded the town. They believed they could make their fortunes by providing the soldiers and people traveling down the Ohio River with supplies. By the summer of 1792, 30 warehouses existed in Cincinnati to meet the needs of these two groups of people.
Lucius Quinctius Cincinnatus was a Roman consul in 460 BC and dictator twice. In 458 BC and 439 BC. His first term as dictator began when Rome was being menaced by barbarian tribes. The Roman Senate pleaded with Cincinnatus to assume the mantle of a dictator to save the city.
According to the legend, Cincinnatus had settled into a life of farming and knew that his departure could mean starvation for his family if the crops went unsown in his absence. He assented to the request anyway and, within 16 days, had defeated the enemy tribes.
The immediate resignation of his absolute authority with the end of the crisis has often been cited as an example of good leadership, service to the public good, and the virtue of modesty. George Washington, General of the American Revolution and the first President of the United States, was considered a latter-day Cincinnatus. So, why isn't the name of the city Cincinnatus rather than Cincinnati? The
Portrait of General George Washington, President General of the Society of the Cincinnati, by Edward Savage, 1790, Harvard Art Museums.
Lucius Quinctius Cincinnatus was Roman consul in 460 BC and dictator twice. In 458 BC and 439 BC, his first term as dictator began when Rome was being menaced by barbarian tribes. The Roman Senate pleaded with Cincinnatus to assume the mantle of a dictator to save the city.
Some of the earliest founders of Cincinnati were officers who served under Washington in the Revolutionary War and prevailed in changing the name of the city from Losanteville to Cincinnati to honor their organization, the Society of the Cincinnati. Cincinnati, which had begun life as a fort in 1789, soon blossomed as a commercial town. Europeans had begun settling the Cincinnati area in the late 18th century, when the population squeeze on the Atlantic seaboard sent thousands down the Ohio River. Most Cincinnatians engaged in commerce, either with the Army or the more than 14,000 inhabitants of Hamilton County. The town was the grand depot for produce that went down the river to New Orleans and for Eastern merchandise, distributed throughout the Miami River area. By 1802 the Mississippi trade had become so important that the newspapers published New Orleans and Natchez prices.
Cincinnati emerged as a river port after 1811, when the first steamboat on western waters, the New Orleans, arrived on its downriver voyage from Pittsburgh. The arrival of the steamboat Orleans in 1811 linked Cincinnati to a chain of trade that led to the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico.
By the 1850s, Cincinnati was the pork packing center of the U.S. and a thriving industrial metropolis.
Ties with the East were maintained by a constant flow of goods and settlers coming down the Ohio River. This is the Ohio Canal system. It consists of two main canals linking Lake Erie to the Ohio River. They are the Ohio and Erie Canal, begun in 1825 and completed in 1832, and the Miami and Erie Canal, begun in 1825 and completed in 1845. The Miami and Erie Canal was completed to Dayton in 1832 and extended to Lake Erie at Toledo in 1845. This canal established both Cincinnati and Toledo as major metropolitan centers. This is a map of the Miami and Erie Canal from Cincinnati on the Ohio River to Toledo on Lake Erie.
This is Cincinnati in 1841, with the Miami and Erie Canal in the foreground. This is a map of the Miami and Erie Canal system.
River commerce, which reached its height in 1852, stimulated steamboat building and industry. At that time, because of its renown as a pork packing center, the city was often called Porkopolis.
Today, Cincinnati loves its flying pigs, a fantasy creature based on our heritage as a pork-packing powerhouse. Few contemporary Cincinnatians can imagine the pungent reality of Porkopolis in the days when slurping, grunting, reeking pigs infested every yard and alley. The first mentions of Porkopolis in print appeared around 1840. But Cincinnati was already packing a lot of hog flesh well before then. By 1840, 48 Cincinnati packing houses employed 1,200 men, producing more than $3 million of packed pork in 1860. 2,400 men slaughtered as many as 450,000 hogs each year in Cincinnati. In 1842, Cincinnati was one of the few American cities admired by the British author Charles Dickens. Cincinnati was one of the largest cities in the United States in 1854, when it was labeled Queen City of the West by the poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow.
Coney Island, just upstream from Cincinnati on the Ohio River, was a popular amusement park in the 1800s.
Because of Cincinnati's position at the northern bend of the river, many immigrants heading for the interior disembarked there, giving the young city the atmosphere of a large hotel. Thousands of German and Irish immigrants settled in Cincinnati, giving it a strong Northern European flavor.
This shows the 6 major immigrant groups coming to Cincinnati beginning in the 1830s. The width of the bars indicates the number of immigrants compared to the local population at the time.
Before emancipation in 1863, thousands of African Americans passed through Cincinnati, a major station on the Underground Railroad. The excess fat from the slaughterhouses gave birth to the local soap industry, as exemplified by Procter & Gamble.
A burgeoning beer empire began flourishing with breweries serving the increasing population of German immigrants.
Cincinnati breweries. The brewery district contains the majority of Cincinnati's remaining breweries and associated structures, such as ice houses, bottling buildings, offices, and stables. With the first brewery north of Liberty Street founded in 1829, German immigrants fueled the growth of the brewing industry. By 1891, Cincinnati breweries produced over 4 barrels of beer per resident annually, almost twice as much as any other city in the nation. The brick breweries were typically designed in the Romanesque Revival style, and larger complexes often covered multiple city blocks. To produce the lager-style beer common by 1860, typically very deep basements were dug or tunnels were cut into hillsides for the lagering process. At the height of production, 18 of the 36 breweries in Greater Cincinnati were operating in over the Rhine and the West End. Prohibition in 1919 closed most of the breweries permanently.
The brick breweries were typically designed in the Romanesque Revival style, and larger complexes often covered multiple city blocks. To produce the lager-style beer common by 1860, typically very deep basements were dug or tunnels were cut into hillsides for the lagering process. At the height of production, 18 of the 36 breweries in Greater Cincinnati were operating in over the Rhine and the West End. Prohibition in 1919 closed most of the breweries permanently. In 1869, the Cincinnati Red Stockings, now known as the Reds, became the first professional baseball team in the country.
This is the City of Cincinnati, 1872, a steel engraving by I.C. Warren. In recent years, Cincinnati has launched major public works projects like Riverfront Stadium and a system of downtown skywalks, and its skyline has soared. The city celebrated its bicentennial in 1988. How did a place once described by President to be William Henry Harrison as the most debauched place I ever saw come to be known as the Queen City of the West? No less a personage than Henry Wadsworth Longfellow dubbed it thus, and it was a hard one-handle. Residents transformed Cincinnati from the pork-packing capital of the country into a city consistently rated as one of the most livable in the U.S. There is nothing like Porkopolis for a nickname to motivate the citizenry toward a brighter day. While other big American cities raised their antiquated downtowns, Cincinnati has long enjoyed a thriving, well-preserved central business district.
It might come as some surprise that this solidly middle-class Midwestern city is famous for its chili franchises. Cincinnati has the highest number of chili joints per capita in the country, and linguistic peculiarities, you'll hear please, for say what, among others. Despite ambitious urban renewal schemes and the rise of the skyline, Cincinnati has many traces of its 19th-century roots, and nearby Milford and Covington, Kentucky, are virtual time warps. Downtown's fine public arts and Art Deco architecture drive home that this is no cowtown. You'll also find world-class museums, zoos, and friendly natives.
The city was founded in 1788 at the point where a Native American trading route crossed the river. Its name comes from a group of Revolutionary War admirers of the Roman general Cincinnatus, who saved Rome in 458 BC and then returned to his small farm and refused to accept any reward or glory.
Cincinnati quickly became an important supply point for pioneers heading west on flatboats and rafts, and its population skyrocketed with the establishment of a major steamboat river port in 1811. Tens of thousands of German immigrants poured in during the 1830s. Loyalties were split by the Civil War. At first, merchants were perturbed by the loss of important markets, but then they began to pick up lucrative government contracts, and the city decided that its future lay with the Union. In the prosperous post-war decade, Cincinnati acquired Fountain Square, the immense music and exhibition hall, a zoo, an art museum, a public library, and the country's first professional baseball team.
Charles Dickens, Winston Churchill and Longfellow all admired Cincinnati. Mark Twain, on the other hand, said that he hoped to be in Cincinnati when the world ended, as it's always 20 years behind everywhere else, over the past 200 years. Proud Cincinnati has captured the fancy of many renowned individuals. Winston Churchill dubbed it the most beautiful inland city in the Union. Charles Dickens called it thriving and animated. And, most famously, Longfellow labeled it the Queen City of the West.
For otherwise common folk, Cincinnati today is a livable city offering steady economic growth, low crime rates, and easy accessibility. Its location right on the bend of the Ohio River, overlooking northern Kentucky, has something to do with it. Cincinnati's position on the Ohio River lured shipbuilding companies to the area at the height of the steamboat era.
The city's coffers grew even more when the Miami and Erie Canal was connected to the Ohio River in 1829.
Finally, however, Cincinnati owes its development to the lowly pig in 1835. The city was the largest pork producer in the nation, a title that would later pass to Chicago and St. Louis. Look for the famous flying pigs in the Bicentennial Commons, the 22-acre riverfront park the city dedicated in 1988 to celebrate its 200th birthday.
In Cincinnati's rapidly growing downtown area, with its museums, entertainment, restaurants, and sporting venues, including the Great American Ballpark, which opened in 2003. You can take in everything from a Bengals football game or a Reds baseball game to a performance by the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra or the Cincinnati Ballet. There are also a variety of museums. The Cincinnati Museum Center, in the renovated Union Terminal, 1933, Railroad Station, houses the Synergy Children's Museum and the Cincinnati Museum of Natural History.
Cincinnati's many hills, green parks, and neighborhoods radiate north from Cincinnati's downtown. The downtown area is laid out along the north bank of the Ohio River, with numbered streets running east-west. 2nd Street is Pete Rose Way. North-south streets are named. Vine Street divides the city into east and west. Fountain Square is the center of the thriving downtown area, which is entirely walkable. Skywalks connect hotels, convention centers, stores, and garages. Across the river is Covington, Kentucky, with a prominent historic district lined with antebellum mansions and beautiful views from Riverside Drive.
Downtown Cincinnati rolls back from the Ohio River to fill the flat basin area, ringed by a disarray of steep hills. During the city's emergent industrial years, the filth, disease, crime and general commotion led the middle classes to abandon downtown en masse. Nowadays, however, attractive stores, street vendors, restaurants, cafes, open spaces and gardens now occupy the area.
The city's rich blend of architecture is best appreciated on the walking tour, detailed in an excellent free booklet from the visitor centers. Over, among and even right through the hotel plazas, office lobbies and retail areas. The Skywalk network of air-conditioned passages and flyovers spans 16 city blocks. At the geographic center of downtown, the genius of the waters in Fountain Square sprays a cascade of hundreds of jets to symbolize the city's trading links.
The fountain is in the middle of a tree-dotted plaza and surrounded by soaring facades of glass and steel. The area is a popular lunch spot and venue for daytime concerts.
Cincinnati points of interest.
This is a map of the Cincinnati area of southwestern Ohio.
Cincinnati is Ohio's third-largest city and has a vibrant tourism industry. If you plan to go, we recommend these 10 sites to visit. Just find them on the map to plan out your trip.
These are the 10 recommended sites to visit. Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden, Great American Ballpark, Cincinnati Art Museum, National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, American Sign Museum, Smale Riverfront Park, John Roebling Suspension Bridge, Cincinnati Museum Center at Union Terminal, Fountain Square, and the Spring Grove Cemetery. This is a map of tourist attractions in Cincinnati.
This is a more detailed map of tourist attractions in downtown Cincinnati. This is a more detailed map of tourist attractions just north of downtown Cincinnati.
Looming above 5th and Vine Streets, the 48-story Art Deco Carutawee has a viewing gallery on its top floor that gives a beautiful panorama of the tight bends of the Ohio River and the surrounding hillsides.
Cincinnati is built on hills overlooking the Ohio River. The Over-the-Rhine district just north of downtown contains the largest collection of 19th-century civic, religious and residential architecture in the U.S. The Over-the-Rhine district is home to the Music Hall and historic Findlay Market, a lively year-round open-air fresh foods market. The narrow, winding streets of Mount Adams reveal stunning views of downtown and the Ohio River. My top choice for a tourist attraction is the Cincinnati Museum Center, is housed in the magnificent Union Terminal. The Union Terminal was built in 1931 at a cost of $43 million, and at the time, was one of the most modern railroad stations in the world. The Union Terminal has been restored to its original Art Deco grandeur. Inside there are 3 museums and an Omni-Max theater.
This is the Cincinnati Union Terminal.
In the Union Terminal is the Cincinnati Historical Society Museum, which is one of the largest regional collections in the U.S. In the Union Terminal is the Cincinnati Historical Society Museum, which is one of the largest regional collections in the U.S.
The Historical Museum has a great exhibit on steamboats that was so much a part of Cincinnati's history. Also in the Union Terminal is the Museum of Natural History and Science, with exhibits that immerse you in various Ohio Valley environments. The Synergy Children's Museum has 9 interactive exhibits, including Waterworks Energy Zone, Little Sprouts Farm and Kids at Work.
The 125-year-old Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden is America's second oldest zoo and one of the best. It has the world's greatest collection of felines and new exhibits of elephants, manatees and polar bears. There is also a children's zoo and a superb botanical garden.
Just east of Fountain Square is the Art Deco headquarters of Procter & Gamble. The company was formed in 1837 by candle maker William Procter and soap maker James Gamble to exploit the copious supply of animal fat from the slaughterhouses of Porkopolis, as Cincinnati was then known. By sponsoring the radio show Poodle Family in 1932, the company created the world's first soap opera. Cincinnati's tallest building is the 48-story Carew Tower. Cincinnati's Music Hall opened in 1878 and is home to the Cincinnati Symphony and the annual Mayfest. The Taft Museum, just east of downtown in an immaculate 1820 Federal-style mansion at 316 Pike Street, contains a priceless collection of works by Rembrandt, Goya, Turner and Gainsborough, plus some staggering Ming porcelain and French enamels. The statue of the Erie Abraham Lincoln in Lytle Park, in front of the museum, was criticized as unpatriotic when unveiled in 1917. It is now seen as a great example of sculptural realism. This is the Taft Museum. The side of the Ohio River has two new stadiums. The Great American Ballpark is the home of the Cincinnati Reds, the oldest professional baseball team in the United States. The Paul Brown Stadium is the home of the Cincinnati Bengals football team.
Just to the east of these stadiums is the mile-long river sidewalk. This begins near the stadium at Public Landing at the bottom of Broadway. The cobbled wharf here, on the original site of the city, is a great place to take a look at immaculately painted show boats and other rivercraft.
Along River Sidewalk, we see a statue of the Roman general Lucius Quinctius Cincinnatus. Mo about him lately. But you can probably guess the connection to this city.
This is a plaque at the statue of Lucius Quinctius Cincinnatus.
Also, along River Sidewalk are several imaginative statues of the flying pigs, a tribute to the days that Cincinnati was known as Porkopolis.
This is a statue of Lucius Quinctius Pigasus.
This is the statue of Lucius Quinctius Pigasus. This is the statue of Lucius Quinctius Pigasus. Along River Sidewalk is a scale model of the Ohio River, from its beginning in Pittsburgh to where it joins the Mississippi River at Cairo, Illinois. The William Howard Taft National Historic Site commemorates the only man to serve as President and Chief Justice of the United States. The house that Taft was born in has been restored to its original appearance.
A visit to the site includes a tour of the restored birthplace and 4 period rooms that reflect the family life during Taft's boyhood. The home also includes second-floor exhibits highlighting Taft's life and career.
This is the William Howard Taft National Historic Site.
The Taft Education Center, located adjacent to the birthplace, houses an orientation video and exhibits on later generations of the Taft family. The popular exhibit of the center is an animatronic figure of the president's son, Charlie Taft, who tells stories about different family members. Just over a mile northeast from downtown, the land rises suddenly, and the streets, narrow courses with tight corners and abrupt dead ends, start to conform to the contours of Mount Adams. Century-old townhouses coexist with avant-garde galleries, stylish boutiques, trendy gift shops and international restaurants. During the late 19th century, the elegant dining rooms of Mount Adams entertained the rich and famous eager to escape the squalor and noise of the basin.
Adjacent to this tightly packed neighborhood are the rolling lawns, verdant copses and scenic overlooks of Eden Park, its features reflected in the new Mirror Lake, a man-made pool installed as part of the city's Millennium Project.
A loop road at the northern end of the park leads to the Cincinnati Art Museum. It has 100 labyrinthine galleries spanning 5,000 years.
The Cincinnati Art Museum has an excellent Islamic collection and a selection of European and American paintings by Matisse, Monet, Picasso, Edward Hopper and Grant Wood.
The American Sign Museum is dedicated to the art and history of commercial signs and sign-making. The American Sign Museum is the largest public museum dedicated to signs in the United States,
covering more than 100 years of American sign history and 20,000 square feet of indoor space. The museum is a walk through the ages of technology and design. The American Sign Museum offers an audio tour on your phone. This tour explains various topics and surprising stories about the signs themselves. The National Underground Railroad Freedom Center is a museum in downtown Cincinnati based on the history of the Underground Railroad and opened in 2004.
The National Underground Railroad Freedom Center pays tribute to all efforts to abolish human enslavement and secure freedom for all people. The Great American Ballpark is the home stadium of the Cincinnati Reds. It opened in 2003, replacing Synergy Field, formerly Riverfront Stadium. the Reds' home field from 1970 to 2002. The Great American Insurance Company bought the naming rights to the new stadium for $75 million for a period of 30 years. This is a view of downtown Cincinnati showing the two ballparks. This is the John G. and Phyllis W. Smale Riverfront Park. The Smale Riverfront Park is along the Ohio River near the base of the Roebling Suspension Bridge. The Smale Riverfront Park includes a carousel, multiple playground areas, water features, giant's wings, walking paths and monuments.
This is the Smale Riverfront Park, with the Roebling Suspension Bridge across the Ohio River in the background. A major aerial landmark is the bright blue 355-yard-long Roebling Suspension Bridge across the Ohio River to Kentucky. It was built in 1867 by John Roebling, who later used it as a prototype for his design of the Brooklyn Bridge, built a few years later.
The Roebling Suspension Bridge connects Cincinnati with Covington, Kentucky. This is another view of the Roebling Suspension Bridge.
Covington is directly across the Ohio River on the Kentucky side, and is very much a part of the Cincinnati hinterland. It can be reached from downtown Cincinnati by walking over the Roebling Suspension Bridge. On the Covington side is the Covington Landing, the largest waterfront complex on inland waters, a collection of cafes, shops and clubs on permanently moored boats. A 10-minute walk southwest of the bridge is the attractive, narrow, tree-lined streets and 19th-century houses of the Mainstrasse village. It is a Germanic neighborhood of antique shops, bars and restaurants that plays host to the lively Mayfest on the third weekend of each May. It is the centerpiece of the citywide Oktoberfest on the weekend after Labor Day.
This is Mainstrasse Village in Covington, Kentucky. At 6th and Philadelphia Streets, 21 mechanical figures accompanied by glockenspiel music toll the hour on the German Gothic carol chimes bell tower. Just beyond Covington is the Oldenburg Brewery, crammed with boozing memorabilia. There are tours of the microbrewery and its museum.
The Newport's aquarium is across the Licking River from Covington. Clear underwater tunnels and see-through floors surround visitors with sharks and snapping gators. The economy of Cincinnati. Cincinnati is a transportation center served by railroads, interstate highways, and international airlines. Cincinnati Today is one of the largest inland coal ports in the United States.
Cincinnati's industries are highly diversified and include machine tools, soap products, playing cards, pianos and electronic organs, chemicals, clothing, building materials, furniture, cosmetics, printing, jet engines, and packaged meats.
Another major industrial firm in Cincinnati is Procter & Gamble. Founded in 1837 by William Procter and James Gamble. Procter & Gamble is a multinational consumer goods corporation specializing in various health, personal care and hygiene products. This is the Procter & Gamble World Headquarters building in Cincinnati.
The University of Cincinnati, UC or Cincinnati, is a public research university. It was founded in 1819 as Cincinnati College and is the oldest institution of higher education in Cincinnati. It has over 44,000 students, making it the second largest university in Ohio.
The climate of Cincinnati.
Will it be hot? Or will it be cold in Cincinnati?
Here are the average high and low temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year in Cincinnati.
Here are the average high and low temperatures in degrees Celsius throughout the year in Cincinnati.
Rainfall in Cincinnati. Here is the average precipitation in inches throughout the year in Cincinnati. The total yearly rainfall is 42 inches or 1,058 millimeters.
Here is the average precipitation in millimeters throughout the year in Cincinnati.
Here is the average number of days per month with precipitation throughout the year in Cincinnati. We see that it rains about 10 days every month throughout the year. Recommended videos, Cincinnati.
Recommended video, Top Things to Do in Cincinnati, Travel Guide 2021.
Recommended video, Best Things to Do in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Recommended video, Cincinnati, Ohio. The top 10 places you need to see. Recommended video, Great. Near great. Not so great moments in Cincinnati history.
Recommended video, Cincinnati Transit History.
Recommended video, YouTube navigation.
Recommended videos, Walking and Driving Tours of Cincinnati. For a street-level experience of Cincinnati. View the video walking tours. It's the next best thing to being Thay.
Recommended videos, Walking and Driving Tour of Cincinnati playlist.
Table of Contents. Cincinnati.
Thanks for watching. Please watch some more of my great videos.